A single mother was sobbing quietly on speakerphone, begging a self-proclaimed tech guru not to fail her 16-year-old son after she had scrubbed hospital floors on double shifts for 6 months straight just to pay his $3,500 tuition. The man holding the boy's future in his hands did not show an ounce of mercy. Instead, he unmuted his microphone in front of 300 live students, told the kid he was fundamentally incapable of basic thought, and permanently locked him out of the portal. He thought his wealth and private encrypted servers made him untouchable. He believed nobody could ever hold him accountable. But he made one fatal mistake. I was his lead systems engineer. I was the one who built the locks to his empire, and I still held the master key. If you have ever felt a burning desire to see an arrogant bully face absolute, calculated justice for destroying innocent lives, subscribe and get ready for a payback you will never forget. My name is Maya. I am 28 years old, a self-taught back-end architect, and someone who learned early in life that real power does not come from loud voices. It comes from quiet competence. To understand how this monster fell, you first have to understand the world he built. His name was Julian Vance. If you were anywhere near the online tech space over the past 2 years, his face was impossible to escape. He had the custom-tailored suits, the rented sports cars, the glass penthouse overlooking the skyline, and a slick, practiced voice that sounded like pure inspiration. He was the founder of Vance Cloud Foundry, an elite online tech academy that promised to turn teenagers, high school dropouts, and struggling retail workers into six-figure cloud engineers in less than half a year. His sales pitch was targeted like a laser at the most vulnerable people imaginable. He told working-class parents that a traditional college degree was a scam. He told ambitious young kids who felt stuck in dead-end jobs that all they needed was his mentorship. Desperate families took out second mortgages on their homes. Elderly grandparents emptied their modest retirement savings. Young teenagers worked late-night shifts at fast food restaurants, handing over anywhere between $3,500 and $6,000 for a seat in his virtual classroom. When Julian hired me as his lead infrastructure engineer, I was initially proud of the work. I needed the steady income to pay for my younger sister's medical treatments and college tuition. In the beginning, I believed Julian was actually doing something noble. However, the moment I was given administrative access to the back-end systems and looked directly at the underlying curriculum, my stomach dropped into a sickening knot. The course was a total sham. It was not elite cloud infrastructure training. It was a chaotic mess of stolen text files, plagiarized open-source code libraries from the early 2000s, and low-quality screen recordings where Julian struggled to explain terms he was clearly reading off a teleprompter. Worse than the terrible content was the business model itself. Julian operated what he privately called a churn-and-burn funnel. He had deliberately programmed the automated grading pipeline to ensure an 80% failure rate. I remember walking into his private penthouse office during my 3rd month on the job. I showed him the test logs on my laptop screen. I pointed out that the automated grading scripts were rejecting students who had written completely clean, bug-free, perfectly functional code. Julian leaned back in his Italian leather armchair, swirled a glass of expensive bourbon, and looked at me with an empty, condescending smile that made my skin crawl. He told me that if all the students passed, they would demand internships and job placements that did not exist. He told me that when students fail, they blame themselves. They believe they are lazy or not smart enough. And when they want a second chance to pass the final exam, they pay a non-refundable $1,200 re-enrollment fee. He looked me straight in the eyes and said that failure was where the real profit lived. He ordered me to keep the rejection threshold above 80% and reminded me that I was replaceable. I stood there in complete silence, feeling a bitter, burning rage rising in my throat. I realized right then that I was not working for an educator. I was maintaining the digital infrastructure of a parasitic con artist who was profiting off the broken spirits of hopeful children. The turning point came on a cold Tuesday evening during a live, mandatory code evaluation. Julian loved hosting these sessions. He pretended they were high-stakes mentorship sessions to prepare kids for corporate pressure. In reality, they were public humiliations designed to break the students down so thoroughly that they would blindly pay for retests without asking questions. That night, a quiet 16-year-old boy named Leo was brought onto the main screen. Leo lived in a small rural town, worked 20 hours a week stocking shelves at a local supermarket, and shared an old, battered laptop with his 2 younger sisters. I had personally reviewed Leo's code repository earlier that morning. The boy was an absolute prodigy. He had designed and built a distributed server algorithm from scratch that was significantly more optimized, elegant, and efficient than anything Julian himself could ever code. Julian brought Leo's screen up in front of the entire live audience of over 300 students. He immediately began laughing dismissively into his high-end microphone. Julian asked Leo who told him he was allowed to write code like a toddler. He insulted the boy's structure and called his algorithm completely useless in a production environment. Leo tried to speak up. His voice was trembling so badly you could hear the raw panic in his throat. He explained that his algorithm reduced memory overhead by 40% and that he had spent weeks testing the performance logs. Julian cut him off instantly. He barked into the microphone that talking back to an instructor was grounds for immediate expulsion. He stamped a red 0 across the screen, announced that Leo had failed the entire curriculum, and declared that his tuition was entirely non-refundable. That was when Leo's mother unmuted from the other side of the room. Her voice was cracked with exhaustion and pure, heartbreaking desperation. She begged Julian on behalf of her family. She explained that she worked late-night hospital shifts and had borrowed money from her relatives just to give Leo a chance to build a better life for them. She pleaded with Julian to look at the boy's work again and give him a second chance. Julian did not even pause. He let out a cold, sharp laugh that echoed through the headphones of every single person on the call. Julian told her that maybe her son belonged in the hospital cleaning floors right beside her. He said some people were born to build systems while others were born to take out the garbage. With a single click, Julian severed their audio, wiped the boy's profile from the server, and moved on as if nothing had happened. I sat at my desk in the dark, my knuckles turning white as I gripped the edge of my table. My hands shook so violently with pure, blinding anger that I could barely breathe. Julian had not just stolen their hard-earned money. He had crushed a mother's dignity and shattered a brilliant child's dream just to satisfy his own disgusting ego. I stared at the glowing blue monitors in front of me. I took a slow, deep breath, let the fury settle into cold, crystal-clear focus, and whispered into the empty room that Julian was going to lose everything he had ever built. True revenge requires absolute patience and flawless precision. If you act in a blind fit of emotion, you make mistakes. But if you sit back, gather real evidence, and use your opponent's arrogance against them, the collapse is total. Over the next 4 weeks, I lived a double life. From 9 to 5, I played the part of Julian's obedient, silent infrastructure manager. I nodded at his demands, updated his servers, and let him believe he was an untouchable genius. From midnight until dawn, I became the digital architect of his downfall. Julian was fundamentally lazy and technically ignorant. Because he did not understand the advanced cloud pipelines I had built for his company, he had granted me unrestricted root-level administrative access to every single server, database, payment gateway, and private storage locker. First, I executed a complete deep-level data extraction. I developed a set of quiet background scripts that scraped every single digital asset Julian had ever put behind a paywall. I pulled down over 600 hours of high-definition video lessons, complete architectural frameworks, mock interview question banks, proprietary backend code bases, and every single exercise project. It was over 5 terabytes of uncompressed educational material that Julian had been hoarding and charging desperate people thousands of dollars to see. Next, I turned my attention to his criminal fraud. I spent days combing through the server logs from the past 2 years. I isolated the exact lines of hard-coded algorithmic scripts where Julian had deliberately programmed the grading engine to fail 82% of students regardless of test scores. I compiled every timestamp, every manipulated test result, and every private message where Julian explicitly commanded me to fail incoming students to increase re-enrollment revenue. I created an airtight, undeniable legal dossier that left zero room for plausible deniability. Finally, I designed a distribution plan that no lawyer or copyright strike could ever stop. I knew that if I simply uploaded the stolen curriculum to a standard website, Julian's legal team would issue emergency takedown notices and erase it within hours. I had to ensure the data became completely immortal. I established a decentralized peer-to-peer torrent network across hundreds of offshore cloud lockers. I built structured, easy-to-read public code repositories that contained the entire multi-thousand-dollar curriculum. I spent dozens of sleepless hours fixing all of Julian's factual errors, rewriting the broken explanations, and stripping every single trace of his name from the documents. I turned his overpriced scamming academy into the cleanest, highest quality, and completely free tech education library on the internet. I scheduled the automated execution for 8 o'clock on a Saturday evening. That specific Saturday was the night of Julian's annual tech gala. It was a massive black tie banquet hosted at a 5-star hotel downtown, broadcast live across all his social media channels to over 6,000 prospective students, tech recruiters, and high-profile industry influencers. The gala was designed to launch his newest scam, an ultra-exclusive $10,000 executive mastermind tier. When Saturday night arrived, I sat comfortably at my desk with a cup of black coffee, watching the live video stream on my secondary monitor. Julian looked radiant on stage. He was wearing a custom navy tuxedo, holding a glass of vintage champagne under the blinding stage lights, speaking with effortless charisma into a gold lapel microphone. He looked out at the crowded ballroom and into the cameras, telling the world that true success requires elite sacrifice, and announcing that his new $10,000 tier would separate the true winners from the average crowd. At exactly 8 o'clock, my digital clock flipped. I reached for my keyboard, brought up the main terminal window, and ran the final deployment script. With a single tap of the Enter key, the entire structure of Vance Cloud Foundry detonated in real time. First, my script executed an immediate, irreversible DNS redirect across all of Julian's official websites, payment portals, and social funnels. Anyone trying to visit his website was instantly met with a stark black screen displaying bold, glowing white text that read, "Education belongs to everyone, and the Vance fraud ends tonight." Directly underneath the banner were high-speed download links, mirror portals, and direct public repository access to every single course file, unpaywalled and completely free for the entire world to download forever. Second, the script mass dispatched the fraud dossier to the Federal Trade Commission, state consumer protection bureaus, prominent tech journalists, every major tech creator on the internet, and all 14,000 past and current students on Julian's private mailing list. Third, and most devastating of all, I hijacked the live broadcast feed directly through the media server. Julian was right in the middle of pitching his $10,000 program when the massive 50-foot LED screen behind him on the main stage flickered violently and cut to pure black. The smooth background music vanished. The hotel ballroom went dead quiet. A split second later, the venue's massive subwoofers vibrated as Julian's own voice blasted through the room, crystal clear, unedited, and unmistakably loud. The speakers played the private recording of our meeting where he laughed about students failing, openly stating that if they passed they would demand jobs, so we had to keep the failure rate at 82% to collect $1,200 re-enrollment fees. The entire ballroom turned to stone. Nobody moved. You could hear the distant clatter of a server dropping a tray of glassware in the back of the hall. Julian's face went bone white. The smug, polished smile vanished completely, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated terror. His eyes darted across the crowd as the giant screen behind him switched to Leo's brilliant project, followed by the clear audio recording of Julian telling a weeping mother that her son belonged in the trash. The live chat scrolling on the venue's secondary monitors exploded into absolute chaos. Thousands of comments per second poured across the screen, calling him a criminal, exposing the free download links, and demanding immediate legal action. Julian dropped his champagne glass on stage. It shattered loudly across the polished hardwood floor. He grabbed his microphone with shaking hands, screaming at his production team to pull the plugs and shut down the power. He frantically pulled out his smartphone to access his administrative control panel, but his hands were trembling so violently he could barely type. When he finally submitted his credentials, the screen flashed bright red. Access denied. Master credentials permanently revoked. I had already rotated all the root cryptographic keys, wiped his master access tokens, and locked him out of his own multi-million-dollar platform forever. The fallout over the next month was legendary. The free educational repositories went viral overnight, trending across every major developer community and social network. Within 48 hours, more than 300,000 students worldwide had downloaded the entire curriculum for free. The files were permanently mirrored across thousands of servers, making them entirely impossible to erase. Julian's brand new $10,000 mastermind program collapsed before signing up a single customer. His existing victims organized an immediate class action lawsuit, backed by the irrefutable back-end logs I had provided to federal regulators. Within days, payment processors froze every corporate account associated with his name to prepare for massive fraud restitution. Within 3 weeks, Julian was forced to surrender his luxury office lease. His leased sports cars were repossessed from his driveway, and he vanished from the internet in complete disgrace, his name permanently ruined across the entire tech industry. About 2 months after the dust settled, I sat at a coffee shop and opened an email from a name I did not immediately recognize. It was Leo. He wrote to tell me that after the files were leaked for free, he studied the complete corrected curriculum day and night for 6 weeks straight. He passed his formal international cloud certifications with top marks and had just signed a contract as a paid junior cloud engineer at a major technology company. Attached to the bottom of the email was a photograph of his mother standing in their small, modest kitchen. She was holding Leo's first official employment letter, tears streaming down her face. But this time she was smiling with pure, unbreakable pride. I closed my laptop screen, took a slow sip of my coffee and looked out the window. Bullies and con artists always believe that money and arrogance make them untouchable. They look down on honest, hardworking people and assume their victims will always stay silent. They forget that knowledge should never be locked behind a wall of greed, and that sometimes, the quietest person in the room is simply waiting for the right moment to tear down their entire house of cards. Julian Vance spent years building an empire on stolen dreams and manufactured failure. In the end, his own greed became the one single failure he could never buy his way out of. If this story gave you goosebumps and brought a smile to your face, make sure to hit that like button right now. Leave a comment down below sharing the most satisfying payback you have ever seen, and subscribe to the channel for more unbelievable stories of real-world justice.